Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come.
Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan.
I suppose we all mark the beginning of the pandemic that we've all been living through by the date that we first felt its effects in a way that altered the patterns of our lives. For me, today marks the beginning of month 3 of the pandemic. On March 16th, I sat in Spencer's coffee shop in front of my laptop, working on a piece of writing that has occupied me for the past year. A cup of dark roast with extra half and half beside me. The next day, Spencer's was closed for indoor dining, as were Starbucks and Barnes & Noble Cafe, my other trusty writing spots. Suddenly, the world was different. I'm sure we all have our own stories. For some, it was the day we were first told to wear face masks at our work sites. For some, it was when they first asked a neighbor, "How do I get a face mask?" For others, it might have been a far more serious question. Can I visit my mother now that she's been hospitalized? Or how can I arrange for childcare now that my children no longer have to go to school, but I still have to go to work? It's been suggested that we're all in the same boat. But as a perspicacious Facebook meme has it, we're all in the same storm, but in different boats. The question I think that we should consider today is, what can we do to both survive and thrive during this difficult time? The challenge I feel today can be summarized in a version of the quote from Jesus in Matthew chapter 28, verse 11. "Come to me, all you who are heavily burdened, and I will do my best to refresh you." What is the boat that you find yourself in as we enter the 3rd month of this storm? For some, release from the usual spate of activities has provided a welcome respite, an opportunity to spend time with family members, especially children, and a time to pursue personal interests that are usually relegated to the sidelines because of pressing responsibilities. Some friends of mine have been able to work from home, and that's been a pleasant change. Some have had work hours reduced drastically, but still have their full paycheck coming in. They are living in a different storm than those who are out of work and waiting for unemployment benefits to come through. Some small business owners have continued to pay staff, even though those staff members have been laid off. They know that they can't do this forever. Businesses in Tennessee have reopened. Employees can no longer collect unemployment benefits if they feel their health will be endangered by going back to work. They are forced to choose between their health and a paycheck. The injustice that lies at the heart of a heartless economic system has been laid bare. Some of us are furious. Others just feel defeated. And some of us bounce between those two extremes and experience a range of other emotions as well. I invite us all to take a breath and think about how this pandemic is affecting various classes of folks. People living alone, people suffering from anxiety and depression, people living in nursing homes, people housed in jails or prisons, people in high-risk categories for severe illness or death, those over age 16, those dealing with hypertension, cardiac disease, lung disease, cancer, diabetes, and obesity. People working on the front lines of the battle in hospitals, doctors, nurses, certified nurses' assistants, nurse practitioners, first responders, people in essential positions, grocery store clerks, people stocking the shelves, store managers, department managers, cooks, drive-through restaurant servers, care providers in nursing homes, public transportation personnel, delivery truck drivers, meat processing plant workers. Think especially of those working in those positions without adequate personal protective equipment, or those who only recently got such equipment. Now, think of those who got laid off, more than 36 million of them, who are trying to make ends meet on half the income that they're used to. And think of those whose positions were abruptly terminated with no financial compensation at all. Think of those whose living situations have been radically altered, who are forced to move in with relatives in quarters that are far from ideal. One of my responses when I think of people in such circumstances is an upwelling compassion for them and their struggle. Another response is to feel gratitude that I don't have such difficult circumstances confronting me. My Social Security check continues to come in. My living expenses have probably decreased as I stay at home or eat out less, buy coffee at coffee shops, not at all. I feel a greater sense of peace and being centered when I realize how much worse it could be. Actually, I feel a greater sense of solidarity with others now when so many people have adopted my stay-at-home lifestyle. I call this relativizing my pain, recognizing that compared to others, I don't have it all that bad, though I desperately miss opportunities to socialize with friends. And yet this relativizing does not work for everybody. When I spoke to a family member about framing my experience this way, she seemed to take offense. Though I was only repeating my own experience, she viewed such a perspective as minimizing her own pain and anguish. And here is a place to stop and reflect on something that we need to stop and reflect about more often than we do. People are different. We have different constitutions, different metabolisms, different upbringings, different philosophies, different ways of adjusting to what life throws at us. What works for me does not work for everyone. When asked what the worst grief one can suffer, a wise person once said, "Your own." We all have our own griefs, and comparing our grief to another's will not be profitable, though comparing how we are situated may be helpful. We are not all well equipped to deal with grief, and we should be clear it is grief we are all feeling, though the grief may be at different levels for each of us. Grief, as we've learned from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work on death and dying, has stages. The emotional turmoil we feel ourselves going through during this time reflects the stages of grief we are making our way through. In a way, though it may be difficult to see it, what we are going through is an opportunity for growth. Though so baldly put, that might seem presumptuous and glib. Think about it though. If we don't learn to adapt to a situation beyond our control, we won't survive. We won't thrive. We won't grow. Finding the resources that help us make our way through this seeming morass is, by definition, a sign of growth. Last Sunday marked the 11th anniversary of my time, my first time, speaking from the pulpit to this congregation. Charlie Pickle was the chair of the search committee that decided to nominate me as your minister. And during the first year or two of my ministry, as I struggled sometimes to make sense of the challenges I was presented with, I would meet from time to time with Charlie to seek his advice and wisdom. And as we sat down together, his first question to me was always the same. What are you up against? It was a caring and supporting way to begin a conversation. And that's our question today. A broader question, though. One that asks both, what are we up against as individuals, and what are we up against as a society? It will take compassion to answer each question, compassion for ourselves as individuals, and compassion with how others respond, others living under different conditions than we are, others facing different levels of challenge, others making different choices. I wish I could find the box that popped up on Facebook a week or two ago. Since I can't, I'll just approximate what it said. It listed 5 categories of behavior, which essentially correlated to varying levels of tolerance for risk. Level 0 includes those persons who are responding to the threat of infection during this pandemic by sheltering in place strictly. They never leave the home. Grocery orders are placed with delivery services. Friends can drop things off, but they won't come to the door. They don't go outside. Level 1 includes folks who stay sheltered in place most of the time, but go out at quiet times for a walk, or take some exercise, or just to enjoy the weather. They wear a face mask at all times. Level 2 includes folks who go out for exercise and who shop once or twice a week wearing a face mask. Level 3 includes people who do the level 2 things and also feel comfortable taking walks with friends while wearing a face mask and keeping a physical distance of 6 feet or more. Level 4 includes people who carry on with whatever activities are still available in the same way that they did before the pandemic forced governments to impose restrictions on what we have come to think of as normal activities. I think it's helpful for us, first of all, to determine what level we find ourselves in. I have at least one friend who is clearly in level 0. The people I interact with most often in social media are in level 2, some say 2.5. I'm probably in level 3, although I can think of only 4 times I've engaged in this kind of masked and distant socializing. I see a good number of people in level 4, young people hanging out on the WKU campus, others taking walks or shopping in groups. I'm comfortable with the choices that people in the first 4 levels are making. I'm impatient and sometimes angry with the people living at level 4. We all have a tendency to pass judgment. We all feel that our choices are responsible and that other choices are either too restrictive or irresponsible. It's human to pass judgment. But I encourage us to be careful about this. There is a culture war going on, as well as a war against the coronavirus. It's been going on for a long time, and the sides have become more polarized as the years have gone on. It boils down to a clash between individual liberty and social responsibility, which some unfortunately translate to freedom versus tyranny. We've all seen it play out on social media and our more traditional media of communication. I have little doubt that most of us here broadly condemn the behavior of people acting as if there's no danger in going out in the world, as if no pandemic existed. I expect that I myself am judged for some of the choices I make. But calling people idiots does not help. Shaming does not help. If anything, it may make things worse by causing people to be less visible in their violations of the new safety norms, thus providing false reassurance to the rest of us. Emotions are high. We've lost the anchor of normality. Uncertainty is the condition of the day, and uncertainty leads to emotional instability and often emotional volatility. The government has failed to respond in a timely way. There's been a failure of national leadership. The responsibility for leadership has been passed on to state and local governments. States have been forced to bid against one another for testing equipment and personal protective equipment. The federal government, it seems, has bid against states and secured equipment that is then distributed as a form of political favoritism. The president issues guidelines and then encourages protests against those very same guidelines. The governing functions are in chaos. Aaron Blake's April 21st article on the Washington Post is a good timeline resource. We have a right to be angry. The most pronounced effect that I've felt during the past 2 months has not been anxiety about the effect of the COVID-19 disease, but my fury at the government's response. Regularly, I wake at 3 o'clock in the morning, or 3:30, unable to get back to sleep because of the level of emotional turmoil I feel. It's very difficult to know what to do in the face of these emotional disruptions. You may be feeling the same symptoms, either from the same cause or from something else. One thing I've learned is to take a deep breath. And then another. And then another. Just to breathe deeply, till I feel connected with that sense of peace that lies inside if we are patient enough to take that voyage inward. You might call this the peace of God. You might call this a self-regulating biological coping mechanism. It doesn't really matter. It's a free and readily available way to work through emotional turmoil, especially at 3 o'clock in the morning. None of us have lived through a pandemic before. All of us are learning. I would like to think that all of us are learning together, but if that's true, it's only true to a limited extent. To the extent that we are listening, watching, and reading from the same fount of information, we are learning together. To the extent that we are exposed to the same editorials, the same opinionated political coverage, the same official challenges, we are learning together. We all know, though, that there is little overlap between what is offered from the right and left wings of the political spectrum. We are learning together in pockets, which greatly increases the challenges we're facing, greatly increases the amount of social and political conflict we can expect, and which greatly increases the need for community groups and social service agencies to work together. You may have heard the term quarantine fatigue circulating through your news feeds and your social media feeds. Even if you haven't heard of it, I expect you've suffered from it. Personally, I felt I was handling the various fluctuations in my life caused by the pandemic pretty well for the first 6 weeks. Week 7 was a struggle. Week 8 began to feel like a subtle kind of torture. Quarantine fatigue is a real thing. The novelty of this new kind of life has worn off. Meetings on Zoom or Skype are a far cry from in-person meetings. Interacting in 2 dimensions is a faint shadow of 3-dimensional interaction. All of us are feeling deprived of many of the things we most value about life, including the laughter and camaraderie that's shared when spending time with friends, the social stimulus of being around others, even if we're not interacting with them that much, and the lack of personal contact, skin to skin, body to body, human being to human being. Another term most of us never heard before has floated to the social surface: skin hunger. Here's the beginning of an April 29th article from the online magazine Wired. Alice, a 31-year-old director from London, has been breaking the coronavirus lockdown rules. "I almost don't want to tell you this," she says, lowering her voice. Her violation: once a week, Alice, who lives alone, walks to the end of her garden to meet her best friend, Lucy. There, with the furtiveness of a street drug deal, Lucy hugs her tightly. Alice struggles to let her go. "You just get a rush of feeling better," Alice says, "like it's all okay." Aside from Lucy's hugs, Alice hasn't been touched by another person since March 15th, which is when she went into a self-imposed lockdown a week before the official government advised to self-isolate. "I found it really hard," she says. "I am a huggy person. You start to notice it after a while. I miss it." She feels guilty about her surreptitious hugs. "I feel like I can't tell my other friends about it," Alice says. "There's a lot of shaming going on. I know we aren't meant to, but I'm so grateful to Lucy for checking in on me. It gives me such a lift." The need for physical touch, the need to obey official guidelines so that everyone remains safe, the fear of being shamed. It will be a challenge for us to find the narrow path that allows us to meet our needs, and we need to be patient with one another as we struggle to find balance in our lives. Of necessity, we won't be able to do everything. People suffering from depression and anxiety disorders have different needs than those who are not. We need to trust them to do what they need to do to meet their needs. Shaming and sitting in judgment will not improve the situation. We need to be gentle with ourselves, and we need to be gentle with one another. Isolation is the breeding ground for loneliness. Loneliness is the breeding ground for depression. Uncertainty is the land where anxiety lives. Some of us are more vulnerable than others. We are all entitled to do what we need to do to meet our needs. And we are all obliged to act in a way that respects the health and safety of our neighbors, the society at large. Our country has not found a way to balance these conflicting needs of individual liberty and social responsibility. But we as individuals need to take on the challenge of finding balance in our own lives. We in Kentucky have been fortunate in the leadership we've gotten from our State House. National polls have consistently rated the response led by Governor Andy Beshear as the best or near the top of that of any state in the nation. This is because he has been successful in the steps that he's taken to mitigate the transmission of the virus, the promptness and decisiveness of his actions, but also because of the calm and measured approach that he's taken. He has struck a tone that some have called pastoral, meaning that he has demonstrated compassion for those individuals killed by the virus and the families and communities dealing with those losses, and compassion for those still struggling with the disease in nursing homes, assisted living facilities, jails, and prisons. At the center of his response has been compassion. We've all heard about the green lights being a symbol of compassion and of ringing bells as an acknowledgement of the losses that we've had, the lives that have been lost. Such compassion starts with us for ourselves, and then for those close to us, and then for those we don't even know. Compassion for the state of all humanity, as all humanity goes through this trying time together. Compassion for ourselves. How do we practice that? One place to start is to recognize that there is much these days that is out of our control. To acknowledge that is to begin to come to terms with it. Once we've done that, and we need to do it as a continuing practice, we have the opportunity to name those things that are within our control and take the steps we can to make order out of disorder. If we see making our bed in the morning as a chore, we are likely to avoid doing it. If we see it as an opportunity to make a place of order and peace, we might find a way to enjoy it. I confess that I usually see bed making as tiresome. What's the point? The bed's going to get messed up again anyway, and I'm not expecting company. But recently, as I viewed making the bed as an opportunity for feeling the sheets between my fingers, feeling the heft and softness of the blanket, the pleasing embroidered pattern of the white bedspread as it settles down into place, I experience something gentle and sensual, and the feeling of peace that comes with orderliness. The same goes for washing the dishes in the morning as the water boils for coffee. Even sweeping the house has rewards of rhythm in the movement of the broom and the body. There is something like a Buddhist meditative quality in doing things for the sake of doing them rather than for the sake of getting them done. Also helpful for me is keeping a daily list of activities. Making breakfast, lopping off branches from an overhanging tree, mowing the lawn, watering the newly planted lilac bushes, reading, listening to music, talking on the phone with a friend, paying bills, even resting, are activities that are meaningful when they find a meaningful place in the journal of our days. And having a project. I had mentioned earlier that I've been working on a writing project for the past year or so. Devoting a couple of hours a day to an activity that you value helps provide structure for your day, brings order to your thoughts, and helps provide a purpose. And purpose is central to peace of mind and happiness. Finally, I found that focusing on the things that I'm grateful for encourages me to shift my thinking into a more positive mode. It places me in a more satisfying place. Keeping a gratitude journal where I list these things is one way I do that. And the church now has a gratitude page via Slack. We have Michelle Steiner and Roxanne Spencer to thank for that. Have compassion for yourself during this difficult time. Keep a gratitude journal. Make a list of your accomplishments each day. See your chores not as duties, but as opportunities for living in a way that's peaceful and rewarding. Keep in touch with friends on a regular basis, either by phone or by video. Spend an hour at 4 o'clock in the afternoon with Pastor Andy. Balance your need for personal freedom with the need for a healthy society. And remember that the opportunity to breathe each day is not granted to all. When you feel the world closing in, or your heart beating fast, or things slipping out of control, take a deep breath. And another, and another. As Thich Nhat Hanh says, breathe. You are alive.